Welcome to the year 2002. I'm Claude Dern, and this is meteorologist Jim White for the month of January. The last time we met, we were looking at the tree, the Vermont Christmas tree.
The Vermont State Christmas tree, which came from the Janet Murray residence on Dermody Road and went to Montpelier to the State House on the steps of the State House, which was the Vermont Christmas. And if I could, I'd like to thank some people that made everything such a success. And it was Janet Murray and her family for donating the tree, first of all, and David Estes and the Sacred Heart Elementary School Chorus for singing some Christmas songs at the cutting ceremony, and Mike Williams from the ex-chamber member who acted as MC, and for all the people from Bennington that attended the cutting ceremony. After the tree was cut, it was trucked by the Department of Forest and Parks to Montpelier, and 2 days later, after it was erected and decorated a little bit with lights and everything, I'd like to thank Dave Adams and Jared Shapiro from the Mount Anthony Middle School, who came up with their chorus, and I think there was about 50 kids in that group, and they sang some songs with Governor Dean in attendance. And also, at the same time, the Chris Lance from the Special Olympics from Bennington brought, I think, 20 kids from Special Olympics up, and we all had a tour of the State House along with Janet Murray and her family, and I think there was 14 Murrays up there. So, and everybody was shocked by how many people from Bennington came up with I think there was 83 of us all together, and they never had any participation like that before. So once again, Bennington kind of showed everybody else how to do things, so I'm proud of them.
Yeah, that's great. And you can't get much farther away from Montpelier and stay in the state, except for Bennington.
Yeah.
Well, also this month we've got a little bit to finish up with Jennifer Kimberly about the Taconic Mountains and soils and things. And we very shortly hear Travis Buttle, Vermont Fish and Game Department.
Yep. Travis is always a good guest. Always interesting, Travis.
And we'll be talking about deer herd and some other things, and you're going to enlighten us on how to measure snow.
This is a really good book called A Guide to New England's Landscape by Neil Jorgensen, and there's a chapter in here on the Taconics, and it's kind of hard to believe, but the Taconics actually fell off of the Green Mountains, and it says that the Taconic Mountains seem intimately related to the Green Mountains, but for years the question of how they were formed was one of the great geologic mysteries of New England. Although the matter has not been definitely settled, the present consensus among geologists is that Taconic Mountains literally slid off the top of the Green Mountains. Crustal folding became so intense along the Green Mountains that the whole top of the fold, of which the present-day Taconics are probably only a small remaining part, actually broke off the mountain mass and slid westward a distance of 10 or 15 miles to where they are now.
So a little of that horizontal gravity.
Yeah, so there was probably a big earthquake, and before this, they call it a thrust fault. Before this earthquake came along, the Taconics were on top of the Green Mountains, and this is a picture in Lake Champlain. It's called the Lone Rock Point Thrust Fault, and you can see the lighter colored limestones in that fault right here. And this is what the Green Mountains are like, and this is what the Taconic Mountains are like. And there was a big earthquake, and the Taconics fell off. And they're not flat.
You don't remember when that happened? I don't either. Jim might.
Jim might. I'm sure he does. But we were talking about how there's new water and old water in springs, and how you can, if your spring is dry this year and then it comes back, you can figure that you have new water in it, that it recharged into the ground really recently after the rains. Some springs just run and run and run and run, and it doesn't seem like they really change very much, and they don't change as much with the weather conditions and droughts. And I was talking to a guy up in Beartown that had his spring tested, and they said that it was really old because it didn't have hydrocarbons in it, or from acid precipitation, when we started burning oils. I guess that if you do fine enough testing, you can detect whether there's hydrocarbons and residual things from that. And it's just interesting to know that you could see how old water was.
That would be from a natural spring, or would
A
it
natural
be,
spring, yeah.
but not from a
The
dug
water's
well
just
or
been in, the water's been in the. Well, I suppose you could tell from the well too, but the water's been in the ground for a long time, and not just water that it rained on the top of the mountain and went down into the rocks and then came back out somewhere else.
In general, is our water worse than it used to be? I mean, as far as contaminants and things, or is that kind of a
I think
a
our
myth
water's.
around it?
I don't know, but I think our water's still okay. On the surface water and the shallower water, you'd have to be more careful of if there's
Well, there was always a problem with surface water to some extent.
Yeah.
And people, whether they built up an immunity to it from using it, which a lot of people in third world countries can live under certain conditions that someone from outside goes can't adapt to it. The same as drinking raw milk. I mean,
yeah.
as a kid on a farm, you drink raw milk. Now today, nobody thinks of drinking raw milk because all kinds of things can happen. But it's because you don't have these little immunities and stuff built up, I guess.
And there's back then there might not have been as much concentration of people and cars and runoff and roads and all that other stuff. And I heard a story about an aquifer being polluted from dry cleaning fluid, and once something like that gets in the water, then you can't do anything about it because it just spreads so fast. And so that's what you got to be careful of. We've got good water, we don't want to ruin it.
Well, if we were to take a big knife and cut right down here in the ground and move it to one side so we could look in like a cross section of the earth, what would we see?
Well, right where we're standing, we'd see lots of rocks.
A lot of rock.
If we're standing in a place where there's a good soil, we'd have what we call a soil profile, and that's what we look at when we're mapping soils and just saying, is this a hero soil, or is this a Copac soil, or is this a Nellis soil? And we look at the profile and see the different things of it. And I got a picture here of what a soil profile would look like, and this is what basically all soils are. Is you have the top vegetation growing, and then the topsoil, which is this black part, and soils have been classified as having layers or horizons, and O means organic, this organic matter layer. If it was in the woods, it'd be those leaves and nice sort of leaf mold and composty stuff. And then we have the topsoil, and this is 10 inches, so that's probably not most of Vermont. Probably most of Vermont is like 6 inches or 8 inches. And then we have this B horizon, which is the subsoil, and that still has the nutrients in it that the roots can go down in here. And then this C is like bedrock and starting to make soil. And soil is made by the rocks breaking down, water, temperature, climate, the acidity types of things will eventually break this soil down into these rocks down into soil. But that takes about 10,000 years to make an inch of soil.
Well, I've seen some quite deep soils where alfalfa was planted, and I believe that the alfalfa root was going maybe to 7 foot in depth.
Yeah, they go looking for water too, and that's a tap root, where root going down like this, where the grasses have more of a fibrous root, and trees will have more of a tap root, and there's certain trees that have more of a tap root than others.
And everybody knows what a frost heave is in a road in the wintertime, that just the moisture expands, and I guess that's what can happen in alfalfa fields, that if the frost penetrates enough and freezes the top layer and it expands, and it snaps that big taproot and
Yep.
kills out the alfalfa.
Mm-hmm.
And you can sometimes see in fields where
Those
snowmobiles
come right up through.
rode around and packed down the snow, so it lost its
Yeah.
insulation value, and
Mhm.
you've got the outline of their track from the dead
Yeah.
alfalfa.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what else goes on in that soil? Soil needs to be loose in order to grow. I mean, it can't be a real dense, right?
Yeah, and actually, some of the things that go on in soil, here's a mouse making a hole and earthworm holes. There's all sorts of life going on in the soil, and these leaves will break down. They'll get incorporated into the soil. The worms eat the leaves, and then they kind of recycle it into the soil. There's freezing and thawing.
That would loosen it again.
And that's what, if you go up north into the Champlain Valley in Addison County, you'll see farmers plow in the fall. That heavy clay soil, it's plowed, and as it freezes and thaws in the winter, it breaks it up and loosens it up. Whereas down here, we don't need to do that. It would cause more soil erosion.
And this book is?
This is a book that we've had for a long time. It's an educational booklet. It's called Conserving Soil, but I like the picture on the front. This is a soil conservation practice that we do quite a bit of. It's called contour strip cropping, where you alternate a strip of corn with hay and going across the slope, because water tends to run down the slope, and this way it stops the erosion. That's a really good conservation practice.
Well, that's probably one of the biggest problems with modern day agriculture and forestry and stuff is erosion, because of the types of equipment and things that can be done in the areas. But like you say, there are ways to control it, but it takes an attempt to do it. It isn't going to do it by itself.
It's just like a farmer plowing across the hill instead of up and down the hill will stop, help stop erosion, just because water runs downhill and you're making little dams with your rows. And it's the same thing if you were building a woods road. If you went right up and down the hill, you'd get water running down your wheel ruts and making a big eroded road. Whereas if you built your woods road going across the hill and made some switchbacks, then you wouldn't get any erosion on your road.
Yep. Well, and the water runs downhill here in Vermont, I guess.
Yeah, I think, if I can make water run uphill, I could retire tomorrow.
Well, this has certainly been very, very interesting about the mountains, and we'll follow them around right here and see just where we want to start. In the southeast corner and go around, or the southwest corner?
Now you got me all mixed up. Okay, we're starting looking over east towards the Green Mountains, and there's just a long ridge. You can see the steepness, and then it flattens out at the top. And you start looking north, and that's still the Green Mountains.
There's some pockets of evergreens in there.
Yeah, those look pretty square. Don't you think that was probably planted?
I think probably.
And then there's a kind of almost like a hollow going up into the mountains. That's where the Bennington water supply comes. That's the brook where, is it Woodford Hollow? The water comes down through, and they have a plant up there. And still looking at the Green Mountains. The furthest mountain in the background, that's Glastonbury Mountain. And then we have, that's Bald Mountain. You can almost see the rocks. I did notice that the evergreens are on the top, and probably the soil types are different up there.
Well, that was the Green Mountains, but they
yeah.
used to be a lot greener than they are today.
Yeah. The evergreens will help make the soils different too. And then as you come down off that ridge, you can almost imagine the limestone just sliding off that steep part of the mountain.
It's almost like a boulder field in a way at the bottom. Not huge boulders, but there's just loads of rocks at the base of the Green Mountains on the east side of the Route 7 corridor.
Yeah, and you'll talk to a lot of farmers, and they'll say, yeah, I know that east of Route 7 the fields are rocky, and west of Route 7 they aren't. And they're kind of right. As the rocks have been rolling off the Green Mountains, they're a little bit more crystalline type of rocks and squarer. The fields tend to be a little bit sandier, and as you head west, the fields get a little bit more, they have a little bit more clay in them. And then straight north of us, the furthest away hump, that's Mount Equinox, and that's part of the Taconic Range. And then still looking north, and behind, you can see Route 7 kind of curving up through there, and so everything to the right is rocky, and to the left isn't as rocky. And then there's the Bennington Battle Monument that's pointing at the Taconic Mountains, and you can't see it real well from here, but the Taconics are steep on the sides, and they have lots of kind of little valleys in them, and where the waters run down through, it kind of eats away at the limestone. It's a lot easier for it
Yeah, at the top of the mountains there, sometimes you can see right through the trees and see the sky, and you know that it's steep going up to it and steep back down the other side.
You can just almost look right through the trees.
Well, that's gives us a little idea of what goes on with the soils and the history of these mountains here. And someday in the future, you're going to share some more information with us about rivers and the water. I know the work has been done in, I guess, in the Walloomsac and Battenkill.
Yeah, we'd like to, we're doing some projects, stream stabilization projects on the Battenkill, using trees and logs and what we call bioengineering stuff, and I'd like to show you some of that and tell people about some of the programs we have that we can offer some financial assistance to help them fix up their stream banks.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming out here in this nice December afternoon. I don't know how many more of them we'll have.
You better enjoy it.
Be white here before long. But we appreciate it very much, and we'll look forward to learning some more about the geology of Vermont. Would a river fall in that category? Hydrology or something? Someology.
Sounds good.
An ology of some sort, anyway. Okay, well, thank you very much.
I'll tell you how the weather people measure snow. So, should we go over to our crop over here? This is what day is today? Thursday.
Thursday.
This snow came on Sunday night, so it's old. While it was the way the weathermen measure snow is they'll have a flat surface, and every time when the snow gets to 3 inches, they'll record their 3 inches and then they'll brush it aside. When it gets to be another 3 inches, that'll make it 6, and they'll brush that aside. The thing about when everybody gets or we hear about Buffalo getting 7 feet of snow, there isn't 7 feet of snow on the ground. There was 7 feet that came 3 inches at a time, up to whatever it takes to make 72 inches, or 84 inches. And the reason they do that is because snow, as it falls, compresses all the time. So they figure 3 inches is about the maximum they can measure without getting compression. So we had, I think, probably 16 or 18 inches of snow here at Lake Shasberry at the end of the storm, but we would have got much more than that, maybe another 4 or 5 inches had we measured it 3 inches at a time. But I was sleeping and you were sleeping, but the weathermen, that's how they measure snow, is to get away from that compression, that packing down of snow, which is only normal that it does that. So.
Makes me think, who makes the decision when you measure that last increment, which is less than 3 inches?
I guess they say it's done snowing. I don't know.
And then if they measure it and it starts again, is that the start of a new one? And you don't have the rule book here.
No,
no.
I imagine there is a rule book too, but that's really the main difference. Is Buffalo doesn't have its 7 feet of snow and never did. They had a total of 72 inches of snow that fell, though.
And I think when Travis gets here, he knows how to measure snow in Kansas, is it?
He did say something about that.
I think so.
We'll have to get him on that.
We can ask him on that.
If anybody cares, right?
Wait, is that him pulling up now?
It looks like
I think so. Yeah, here he is.
Oh, Jim.
Hey, Travis.
Hi.
Claude, how are you?
Good.
See you guys.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too.
You forgot somebody.
Yes, I did. As always, when you go to thank people for doing stuff for you, I'd like to thank Representative Dick Pembroke, who arranged the State House tours for all the kids that went up from Bennington to the State House, because I think probably the rest of the kids around the state are much closer to the State House, and they get to see it all the time. And for a lot of the kids, I think that was the first time they ever saw it. So, and to get a nice tour of the place with all the history, it was very nice. So, I'd like to thank Dick Pembroke too.
It used to be part of our 8th grade education here in Vermont. trip to the State House and everything, and I don't think it's...
Well, I guess now
that
there
much
is,
anymore.
you know, Timmy Corcoran, I guess, does that every year for the kids in Bennington too, but for the kids outside of Bennington. Some of them have and a lot of them haven't.
And we learned about the selectmen, the listers, and the weigher of coal, and the fence viewers, and the tree warden. Very important.
Offices in
Yeah.
the state, yeah.
Right. Well, Travis, you're here today to talk about one of the most discussed issues in Vermont. There's the deer herd.
Yeah.
The
A
deer
lot of experts in the deer herd management, isn't
There
it?
are.
Yeah.
I heard many a story this year, and many a speculation and theory and
Like,
everything else
where
that
are
goes
they?
with it. So, and opinions, they're bound.
Yeah.
But you and your department gather the facts. I mean, that's one of the important
That's one of
jobs
the
that you do.
Right. That's one of the things we're charged with is the management of the wildlife species for this people of Vermont.
And statistics and all types of decisions work into how the herd is managed.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm sure that with everything else, sometimes things are absolutely right, and sometimes maybe they aren't quite so right. But decisions have to be made somewhere, and you do it based on the best you have.
Yeah, that's one of the things. We take as many different statistics and measurements that we can, to formulate whatever numbers we deal with. And mostly that's on the biological side, but they share all that information with all of us because we need to let the public know what's going on and try and let them know how things work and whatnot.
So, do you have the last season's deer kill?
Yeah, I've got a couple comparisons from last year's deer kill. I've got this year's numbers of what all the harvest results were at and things like that. They give us a nice spreadsheet of everything, and I can't remember numbers, especially all these, so I'll just kind of read them off. I've got everything from the bear season results to the turkey seasons and all the deer seasons.
Let's have it.
So, just comparison-wise, last year the bear harvest was 471 bears, compared to this year at 521 throughout the whole state. 46 of those came from Bennington County, so we had a pretty high number of bear kill in Bennington County itself. Last year's season total for archery season was 4,523, and this year it was down a bit to 3,472. So we saw a decline in number of archery
That's
kills.
about 25%.
Roughly, yeah,
Yeah.
right in there. 213 of those were Bennington County for this year. The youth season, we saw a pretty significant, about 10%, 25% of the kill. Was 1,084 for last year, and 812 was this year's total.
So that's a 25% drop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much 25%.
Okay.
55 of those were Bennington County. And for this year's rifle season, or regular deer season, last year was 10,235 deer were statewide, and this year statewide it was 7,275. So again, right about 25%. 843 of those came from Bennington County. And then the muzzleloader season and second archery season. Last year's totals were 4,656 for the state, 3,024 were this year's for the state, 232 of those coming from Bennington County. So, like they kind of predicted at the beginning of the season, we're going to see a decrease due to conditions and the population of the herd. At first they were predicting about 15%, but then it kind of, as they saw things go, it ranged up to about 25, and that's what we saw all the way along there with those numbers.
And when the deer are reported to the station, there are certain statistics that are gathered from that information, and probably sometimes there's more detail than others taken on some deer.
Yeah, usually opening weekend, we have biologists at most check stations, and they take a number of measurements from the deer. One of the things that they found out this year, I spoke with Tim Appleton and John Buck, our two main biologists for the deer population that work with these numbers. What they were saying is that they measure beam diameters of the yearling bucks and spike bucks.
What's a beam diameter?
The beam diameter is the...
I got an antler in there. Do you want me to get it?
well, yeah, either or. We
Let
can
me
use
get
an
it.
antler.
Or, yeah, well,
Yeah. The beam diameter is the measurement that's taken from right at the base of the skull or the base of the antler, and that's the diameter that they measure around that. And what they...
You're saying diameter, but you're saying measuring around it. You convert it to diameter? Or
Yeah,
is it
what they
circumference?
use a special tape measure that converts it for them. They measure the circumference, but it converts it to a diameter.
Okay.
And they use those numbers, the beam diameter numbers. They use the how much fat content the deer have in the body cavity, and the weight of the deer. And they combine all that statistical information, and they can tell what the health of the population is for that local area.
The fat content, would that be just a visual observation? Or?
Yeah, and in certain areas of the body is where fat commonly collects, and so they look at those kind of things. It's not a real way of measuring anything, but they look at the
Get
weight.
generalities out of it.
Right,
Yeah.
and they can tell what the definite weight or health of the deer is at that point. Looks like Jim's got a beam here. It's a nice. Wait, where'd you get this, Jim?
Jim Beam? What you say?
Well, we have this antler here. Where they take the measurement from is, see where all these knobs are at? This is where it sits, right on the base of the skull. And so they take a measurement from right around here, and that's where is the most accurate when you're taking measurements of things like that. You want to be consistent in everything you do. So they take this measurement from around here. They use a special tape measure that converts circumference to diameters. And depending on how well this antler is growing, will, for the age of the deer compared to the age of the deers, will tell how healthy the deer was throughout the antler's growing time. So if there are good feed conditions, the beams will be bigger. If it's poor conditions, or if there are too many deer for a certain area, the beams are going to be smaller, and the health is going to be down. So, hang on to that. That's a prize antler.
That's surprising. Okay.
Well, the availability of food is certainly a consideration always.
Yep.
And what were the goods and bads in foods this year?
Well, we had a very good nut crop as far as acorns, and from the people I spoke to that were in the woods and beach stands, they said the beech nut crop was pretty good. There was a lot of other berries and fruits and things like that came out too. Other feed that they have around that time. Everything, apples were very plentiful.
And those are all the foods available in the summer and stuff. But when we start to get the snow cover and things like that, then other foods become more important.
Right.
And some of those historically have changed when Vermont was so much open land, and the agricultural land is being slowly, has been for 100 years or more, been taken back over by forest, which at certain times a forest gives a lot more food in the wintertime than others.
Right.
Maybe you could give an outlook on that.
Well, the biggest thing is that deer are edge species. They need a lot of edge. They need a lot of new growth, especially for wintertime type of feed. They feed on buds. They feed on browse.
Low growth.
Yeah. Low growth. And without a lot of that type of growth in a forest, if you let things grow up too much, I mean, you guys can explain it probably in better terms than I can. Without that growth, they have less to feed on.
And in my line of work, logging, cutting trees, we create some new openings, and the browse, the tops of the trees in a hard winter when you're falling the trees. That night you go back and look, and they've been nibbled all over.
Yep.
I mean, there's like opening
That's
a
like
new restaurant right
Somebody
next door.
ringing the
Right.
dinner bell.
Yep. Yep.
Chainsaws.
The fall of a tree is a dinner bell. It's a good thing.
But we also have, when there's a fire or the land has been abandoned agriculturally, things, all those things come in to do it.
Right.
So when you have the climax forest and stuff, there's not a lot of animals living there because there's not much for them to eat, really.
Yep. That's one of the things that is commonly come up with a lot of hunters that hunt what they call the big woods, up on the mountains. A lot of hunters up in that area have told me things, similar to what I know also is the fact that there isn't any logging as going on as much up there, so there's not as much new growth and what you consider low growth. Without that low growth, the deer are moving out. It'd be just the same as going into Bennington if there were no restaurants.
Yep.
There's no place to eat. You're not going to stick around.
Well, I always remember a few years ago I was working in an area and some people from Bennington had a hunting camp there, and they said, "Oh my, you're going to ruin the hunting here for us, logging." And so a couple of years later, I happened to be by that same area, and I recognized one of them, and I said, "Well, how'd you do hunting last year?" "Oh my, we all got deer in camp and stuff." I said, "Oh, whereabouts?" They said, "Well, right up where you cut." Well, that's why they were in there for something to eat again.
Yep.
There was also, this was a strange season because it was so warm. There was a real lack of snow, and it was so dry. And I remember how much noise I make walking through the woods, and our feet are, big and flat, and we make a lot of noise. But a deer going through the woods, a deer doesn't make as much noise as a squirrel, really.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, a deer, you're not going to sneak up on anything this hunting
No.
season.
And that was one of the things the department actually had put out in the early part of the season, especially bow seasons, is there were several factors involved. It wasn't just simply the fact of last year winter's deer kill, as far as mortality from the hard winter. It was a combination of that. It was a combination of a lot of feed being in the woods, and the deer didn't have to move anywhere to get food. And the fact that it was so dry and noisy. I mean,
They're noisy for us, but they don't make a lot of noise. I mean, they have those little pointed feet that they don't make a big...
yeah. I mean, it is. They make a lot less noise than we do. But
Yeah.
I have one story from a night that my deputy Wynn Metcalf and I were sitting, watching a field, watching for poachers, and I was outside of the truck. Just you just sit there so long, you just got to stand up for a bit, and I heard something, and we're playing with one of our new toys that we've gotten, and it was some night vision, and I could hear something coming, down the hill. An animal of some kind, and I could look as much as I could see. I couldn't see any movement, and then I got the night vision on, and I saw it. And this deer came walking through, and it sounded like a freight train on a dry leaf.
Yeah.
But at night, he could move more freely. He didn't have to be as quiet because you can't see as well either. But
Yeah.
it was kind of interesting, that kind of thing. I mean, he came within 10 feet of the truck. As long as the lights were out,
Yeah.
it was neat to see. But noisy in the nighttime, quiet in the daytime
Yeah.
is like what you have
Yeah.
too. What you notice. Yeah.
Well, the habits of animals, I suppose almost their instinctive behaviors in a way, tend to maybe change slightly depending on how an area changes by the use, the population, a lot of things. And I noticed that years ago with the bear, where they would be in the beach stands real heavy, and where they'd climb the trees and everything. And it with bear maybe more than deer, it doesn't seem like maybe they have to work quite as hard to exist like they used to.
Well, yeah, and that's another thing. We're talking with the guys that are in the woods the most. They see a lot of these kind of correlations. Some of my bear hunters from the area with the dogs, they've noticed in the last few years the bear aren't as much in the high country. One of the guys, his theory behind it was the mothers or the sows are teaching their young, a lot of your food is coming from down in the low and the valley areas, where they can get to where the people live also, bird feeders, trash cans, this, that, and the other. So they're learning to eat. Beehives.
Yeah.
They're learning to eat down in that area, and they're not teaching them to go back to their traditional feeding areas of the beach stands. The
There's
nut
more
crops.
bear though too, right? And isn't that natural for them to?
We're seeing a
out
larger
from core
population
areas.
of bear,
Yeah.
and that was indicated by our harvests every year. We're having a larger harvest every year,
Yeah.
but that's also correlating with the fact that more bear are down low too. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
without speaking with one of the actual bear biologists that has the hard numbers in front of him and knows exactly what is there. That's one of the things I've heard from them also, is that the bear population is expanding,
Uh-huh.
but it's they're also moving, and the more we draw them into town, the worse bear problems become also.
Yeah. They always lose when they mix with people.
Yeah, more often than not.
I wonder sometimes that through all the publicity about deer season and wildlife management and everything, the people are observing it maybe in a different manner than they used to. I think I'm remembering correctly that 30, 40 years ago, in deer season especially, there were many, I'll call them old timers, but they went back and they hunted on the high country.
On the ridge.
They'd go back all day long. They'd take a lunch with them, and from daylight to dark, they'd be back on the mountain.
Yeah.
And they saw few deer compared to what was down low, but when they got a deer, they got a good one
Right.
up there. And it doesn't seem like there is that percentage of hunters that hunt in that manner anymore.
There isn't as many hunters either, is there? I mean, total.
No, not at all. I definitely have to agree with you on that. Hunter effort, I mean, on the whole, on a major part of it is down. The guys that are still getting the large quality deer or the nice, rack deer and things like that are the guys that put in the effort. They're the guys that go out and scout.
Mm-hmm.
They're the guys that go out and they know the woods well. They know where the deer are coming and going from, and they work for it. A lot of people are nowadays are expecting to go in the woods for a day or two or a weekend and come out with a deer, which you got to do some homework before you get in the woods. And maybe it's lifestyle nowadays. We don't have the time, or we don't want to invest the time to go and do the
Instant gratification, I think they call it.
Yeah.
The lifestyle or whatever, it seems like that the equipment of what you need for deer hunting has changed too. I mean, we used to have a rifle, we had warm clothing and gloves and everything, and now there's another very important piece of equipment that seems like everybody has to have, and that's a four-wheeler.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And that just doesn't seem, in my opinion, to be part of true deer hunting.
Well, one of the things that we've been noticing a lot, and it's a trend all the way across the country, is everybody, especially in the hunting industry, is becoming gadgetized or whatever. Everybody's got to have a gadget for everything there is. I mean, there's calls, there's scents, there's this, that, and the other. And it's another one of the gadgets that they're trying to use for the trade. And you gotta look at the way it's advertised. Go farther, go longer, go whatever. But get back to your basic mode of transportation is your feet. It's also a disrespect for the people that are staying traditional. The guys that still going on their feet, they're having the ATVs come in and in the areas that they have to walk in to get to, and it's really not fair to them to try and stay traditional when you got these machines coming in through and scaring off things that they're working for.
Right.
But that's, I guess, part of changing times.
Well, this year it seemed to me like as soon as archery season started, that deer disappeared. You didn't see them very often anymore, but that was probably more connected to feeds.
I would think so. Mainly the fact that that's when the bulk of the feed came available. The apples got ripe, the nuts started falling from the trees, and just didn't need to move as much to get to that stuff. Yeah, basic the way the deer work is you got their habitat, and it's the arrangement of the food, water, cover, and shelter, and how it's all put together. If you don't have to move very much to get everything you need, you're not gonna. And that's one of the major things I think was a factor also.
Do you have a guess as to what the mortality was last winter? I don't know why anybody lived, to tell you the truth. I really don't. It was so hard out there that month of March. If you moved, you lost. Because there's no way. We're still in a drought.
We're in a drought. Look at that.
Black bear.
There's a November picture, isn't it?
Yep. Now fitting.
Well, who took these pictures? They're beautiful.
I don't know.
Charles Willie. He's not. There's a Willie in the Fish and Wildlife Department.
The little pictures here, I assume that's the photographer's name. It's different on every one.
Yeah. I'm not sure where they get their collection of pictures through. There's a group of people up in the Waterbury office that get together every year to put the calendar together.
Not too many people see those, do they?
No, they're elusive.
What's the latest talk on the catamount?
The elusive catamount. Not really sure. I haven't heard much about them, other than every now and then I get a phone call of a sighting here or there, and I haven't been able to confirm any of them yet. Doing what I can to, as far as trying to get hold of cameras and things like that we might be able to set up in places to see if we can get one.
The Stratton magazine had an article in one of its issues this year about the catamount.
Oh, did they?
And I believe I saw one 12, 15 years ago. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning by the big swimming quarry in Dorset. And it zipped across the road right in front of me and disappeared. And I called it tawny colored, had a little head. The tail was almost as long as the body with a little crook in it. And when I got home that night, I looked in the encyclopedia and everything, and I'm sure that's what I saw. But I don't know, it was just a quick glimpse.
From what I've been told, now you know how you have different species and subspecies and everything like that. The actual Vermont catamount is extinct. The actual subspecies of, basically it's a mountain lion of Vermont was extinct, or is extinct now. What we've been seeing as far as these sightings lately, and I've also heard that there's a small family of them up in the Northeast Kingdom somewhere that has been confirmed. Well, to a point. They are a different subspecies. More than likely, they've come across from the Adirondacks in New York or other areas, like that. Ones that we've had sightings of down here, same possibility that they're coming over from New York area. They're not actual true catamounts, because that, like I said, from what I've been told, and the biologists and history of the department, the actual catamounts of Vermont are extinct. So we're seeing other species coming in where different slight subspecies, different slight genetic makeup.
Well, what I've read about that species of animal, like that some of them will have a so good